We all know that the leading character in the Civil War was Ulysses S. Grant. And he is considered to be an outstanding general who did an outstanding job. He wrote his own memoir, and he is pretty much solidly entrenched in being recognized as the hero of the Civil War. I'd like you to think for a minute along these lines. If we eliminate Grant from our thinking, who would be the top general? Anybody like to venture a name that they might think would take Grant's place?
Sheridan was pretty good.
Sheridan?
No. Sherman.
Sherman? Mm-hmm. Anybody else come to
He'd
mind?
be the top choice.
What's that now?
He would probably be the top choice, even by those in Washington.
Sherman?
I would say Sherman. He was closest to Grant, and I think that he would be the one that would actually be chosen.
Okay, okay. Anybody else want to venture? Throw a name out. Just one general? That's sad.
I'm good with those two choices.
All right?
Mhm.
Okay. Well, I'm not going to talk about either one of them.
Me.
And I'm not saying that this person is going to be my choice either. But it's just that I have selected this person to talk about because it was interesting to me. And the general is George Gordon Meade.
Too cautious.
What's that?
He was too cautious.
Okay. Anybody else have a comment about him?
He was an engineer.
He was an engineer. Mm-hmm. Anything else? What did he accomplish?
Other than saving Gettysburg.
Other than Gettysburg, nothing,
Yeah.
really.
Okay.
Now, the thing is, you have to understand about Meade, like I said, he was cautious.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Now, let me ask you a question. If in the Battle of the Wilderness, and Meade had been in charge, do you think that he would have retreated, or do you think he would have continued south?
He probably he would not have done what Grant did.
Absolutely. So then what would happen? So if he didn't go north, if he didn't go south and continue south, yes, he would have saved a lot of casualties, but on the other hand, he would have prolonged the war.
Mm-hmm.
And it was bad enough that Grant prolonged the war by 2 years.
Sure.
So the thing about it is, just think about me being there, could have went on for 6 years,
Mm-hmm.
maybe longer.
Sure.
The problem with Lee was, Lee knew Meade very good. He didn't know Grant, but he outsmarted him. But he did know Meade, and he knew Meade was a very cautious general.
He knew Meade before the war.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
And he admired him.
He did admire him, but he knew he was very cautious too.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Of course, I will say one thing. He was very surprised by what Meade had done at Gettysburg, because he didn't think that would ever happen.
That's right. Yeah. I don't think Meade thought it would happen either. Oh. Okay. Well, this is what I'm going to talk about. Okay? General George Gordon Meade. General Meade was 47 years old when he was promoted to commander of the Army of the Potomac. Just at the time when it was facing its greatest challenge, the Civil War. And this was a great surprise for him. And I don't think he was prepared for it at all, because it was a critical situation, and he wasn't very high on the list. to take over things like that. But it was one of the greatest challenges of the Civil War. For a person who never wanted to be a soldier, he accomplished with that army was simply extraordinary. He won the Battle of Gettysburg. Even more extraordinary, he defeated the supposedly invincible Robert E. Lee and the vaunted Army of Northern Virginia. That's a big accomplishment. Yet the mention of Meade has always been met with a certain degree of pause and surprise that an officer with such modest credentials could manage to succeed such a mammoth victory and then failed to stop Lee from escaping back into Virginia and thus in the war. Although both of those reactions are unfair, they are also accurate. And together, they have come to define Meade's long-term reputation. Meade graduated from West Point in 1831 and graduated 19 in the class of 56 cadets. He was commissioned a brevet second lieutenant and assigned to Florida to fight the Seminole Indians. In the fall of 1836, he resigned from the Army. A career he had not intended to pursue, even while attending West Point. He then worked as a civil engineer until 1842, when he re-entered the Army as a second lieutenant in the Corps of Topographical Engineers. He was breveted as a first lieutenant and served in the Mexican-American War. After the war, he was involved in building lighthouse construction, and in 1856 was promoted to captain. In 1861, at the outbreak of the Civil War, he was appointed Brigadier General of the Volunteers. He was wounded in the Battle of Glendale, where he was shot 3 times. The Second Battle of Bull Run, the Battle of South Mountain, and Antietam, where he replaced the wounded Major General Joseph Hooker, his Corps commander. Meade won Corps command after leading the only near success in the Union attack on Fredericksburg in December of 1862. And he continued to serve as commander of the 5th Corps throughout the dismal shambles of Fighting Joe Hooker's Chancellorsville campaign in May of 1863. After the battle, Lincoln bestowed the command of the Army of the Potomac on George Meade. Lincoln did not consult, request, or Lincoln did not consult, request, or beg Meade to take the charge, but simply ordered him to take command. Meade confronted Lee in the Battle of Gettysburg on July 1 to 3, 1863. The battle, almost by accident, a result of a chance meeting between Confederate infantry and Union cavalry in Gettysburg on July the 1st. By the end of the first day, 2 Union infantry corps had been destroyed, but had taken up positions on favorable ground. Meade rushed the remainder of his army to Gettysburg and skillfully deployed his forces for a defensive battle, reacting swiftly to fierce assaults on his lines left, right and center, culminating in Reed's disastrous assault on the center. As Pickett's charge, excuse me. Following their severe losses, Lee's army retreated from Gettysburg. Following their severe losses at Gettysburg, Lee's armies retreated to Virginia. Meade was criticized by President Lincoln and others for not aggressively pursuing the Confederates during the retreat. Meade's perceived caution stemmed from 3 causes: casualties and exhaustion of the army, which had engaged in forced marches and heavy fighting for a week. Second, heavy general officer casualties that impeded the effective command and control. And finally, a desire to guard a hard-won victory against sudden reversal. Meade generally performed effectively under Grant's supervision in the Overland Campaign and the Richmond-Petersburg Campaign. After Spotsylvania, Grant requested Meade to be promoted to Major General of the regular army. He stated that Meade has more than met my sanguine expectations. He and Sherman are the fittest officers for the large commands that I have come in contact with, in quotation. Meade's decisions in command of the Army of the Potomac have been the focus of controversy. He has been accused of not being aggressive enough in pursuit of the Confederate forces and being reluctant to act on occasions. His reputation among the public and the 19th century historians suffered as a result of his short temper, his bad relationships with the press, his place in the shadow of the victorious Grant, and particularly the damaging fallout from the controversies with Dan Sickles. Now you all remember Dan Sickles, don't you? And the peach tree orchard, or the peach orchard. Recent historical works have portrayed him in a more positive light. They have acknowledged that Meade displayed and acted upon an understanding of the necessary changes in tactics brought about improvement in weapons technology, such as his decision to entrench when practicable and not launch frontal assaults on fortified positions. In addition, the load of over 20,000 casualties and his best officers and men, Meade have been justified in not attempting a rapid a rapid pursuit with his army in such a battered condition. And this is probably one of the most prominent complaints about Meade and his operations. And that was that he didn't follow up after the Battle of Gettysburg and in the war. And Lincoln was very upset about that. And that, my friends, is my presentation of General George Gordon Meade. Any questions?
Yeah. There's one thing I'd like to point out to you, Jerry. You said in the beginning that in the time there that that President Lincoln had appointed me to commander of the Army of the Potomac. Did you know that he was not the first choice?
Oh, yes, yes.
The only post was because John Reynolds turned it down.
That's correct.
Now, the other thing that I want to point out to you, as far as Gettysburg goes, yes, Meade was at Gettysburg, and he was the commanding general. But there was two men who became the heroes of Gettysburg, and that was General Hancock and General Howard. And if it wasn't for General Hancock, it wasn't bad. And the other thing I want to point out, which you can understand why the President of the United States would be upset with me because he didn't pursue Robert E. Lee. Number one is, on July the 3rd, after Pickett's charge, he came onto the field and had no idea at all that we had won that fight.
Yeah.
He was not even there. He had no idea. He was back on Powers Hill, which was about a mile and a half backwards. And that's where he was. He had no idea that the battle was even fought.
Mm-hmm.
Then his other big controversial thing, and especially what Grant was, is that when Sheridan came to him about going after Jeff Stewart, instead of Meade sticking to his guns and keeping Sheridan with the rest of the army when they really needed him, he turned him loose and he relented under Grant, which Grant said himself that he was disappointed in the fact that he did not stick to his guns and say, I want you to remain here.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So that was a big false that really happened. Now the other thing you got to remember is this. Ask yourself this, why was Grant made the commander of the armies and not Meade? Well, the fact of the matter is, Meade was an Eastern commander. All he ever commanded was the Army of the Potomac, period.
Mm-hmm.
He had to be able to command troops out west and be able to take care of Fort out west, and he was never able to do it. And remember, Grant went out west. He did great out west, but he came north. And when he came east, he had a difficult time with the Army of the Potomac.
Yeah.
And 9 out of 10 times, he didn't like the officers that he had to command. So it would have been very, very difficult for me to ever become the commander-in-chief of the armed forces.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Anything else?
Yeah, thank you,
Good
Jerry.
report, Jerry.
Thank you.
I like it.